This is Join Us in France, episode 221. Bonjour, I'm Annie. Are you getting ready for a trip to Paris, Provence, Normandy, somewhere else in France? I am sure many of you are fans of the arts. If you are, you'll have a lot of choices to make when it comes to seeing art in France. On today's episode, Elyse and I discuss the best places to see modern and contemporary art in France. She loves this stuff and pleads her case for the latest iteration of the arts really well. Maybe even people like me who prefer older, more approachable art should check it out. Show notes and photos for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/221. That's the number 221. Join Us in France is brought to you by Patreon supporters and Addicted to France, a tour company that specializes in small groups for Francophiles. I'll be in Paris giving half-day walking tours between May 5th and May 8th. These are going to be in some of the best areas of Paris: Le Marais, Ile de la Cité, Montmartre, Père Lachaise, Saint-Germain-des-Prés, the Latin Quarter. The Giverny one is already sold out. So check them out on addictedtofrance.com. I'd love to get a chance to show off my country and meet you in real life. Hey, Elyse.
Hi, Annie.
We are going to talk about contemporary art in Paris and also other places in France because you're interested in this stuff.
Yes. I love the way she says this stuff. Yes. I am very interested in this stuff. Yes. Modern and contemporary art. And I was thinking the other day, as I think I had mentioned to you, that obviously, one of the things that people do a lot when they come to France, and particularly when they go to Paris, is they go to museums.
Sure.
And we talk about many of the museums. We've talked about lots of museums, and most of the museums are filled with beautiful old things.
Sure.
And aside from the Puppeteer Center, which is one we've mentioned, there is a lot of really interesting modern and contemporary art, and there are really some wonderful contemporary art museums in Paris and in other cities all over the country. And there are people out there, maybe like me, who are interested in this stuff.
Yes.
And so I thought it would
I'll allow it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Your Majesty. And I thought it would really be a good idea because Paris is wonderful and it probably, I don't know statistically if it's the city with the most, but certainly one of the most museums in the world. Mm-hmm. And there are so many places to go, and there are all kinds of museums of every kind, not just art museums. But I bet that other than Pompidou, for those people who are interested in seeing places that have either modern, which means really 20th century, really starting from the very beginning of the 20th century, or contemporary, which is really like the last 30, 40 years, if they're interested in seeing where there's art of that kind, I thought it would be really fun to know, and also because
I know one place, le Palais De Tokyo.
Yes. Oh, have you actually gone in?
I have not gone in. No. I heard about the naked people and they ran away.
And you ran away.
Yes.
Well, it's not always naked people. But what I was going to say, it's funny that you mentioned the Palais de Tokyo, because what I was going to say is that a lot of these museums, and they are museums, are either in buildings that were built specifically for contemporary art by very famous architects. And that makes them very interesting places to visit.
Just as a building.
As a building.
Yeah.
Or like the Palais de Tokyo, it's part of Trocadero. It was built as monumental architecture in the 1930s, and it got reconverted into a space for contemporary art. Mm-hmm. And so it's an interesting combination of structure from another time period and work that is very, 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 very today.
Right. Yeah. And in Paris, there's also I'm showing off now, Le Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris.
Which is the other side of the Palais de Tokyo.
The river. Yeah.
Oh, no, of the Palais de Tokyo. So maybe how about if I start with, I just sort of would go down my little list.
Sure, go ahead. I'll stop interrupting.
And then you can tell me if these are places you've ever heard of. I mean, I'll start with the Centre Pompidou because it is the biggest, most important, and it is in Europe, the biggest center of modern and contemporary art, period. Okay,
And it's very nice.
It's very nice. I happen to absolutely love this museum.
I agree. That's one that I really enjoy.
It's there are people who still it's really ugly with all these tubes in yellow, green, and blue, and that, and I think it's fun, and I think that the spirit of this museum is fun because it was designed in the 1970s. It actually opened in 1977, which means what? It's what? Count for me. 40, 50, 40,
Oh, I can't
40,
count.
40 years
Yeah,
old.
something
40
like
years
that.
old. It was designed by two very, very, very famous architects, Renzo Piano, who is a fabulous Italian architect who's still alive, and Richard Rogers, not the man who wrote the songs, different Richard Rogers, who is an American. And what they did was they created a space under the president at the time, who was George Pompidou, which is why it's actually... It has two names, but it's because he loved modern and contemporary art and collected a lot of it. And so he found the financing. I won't even go into it. I have no idea where
It was a long story.
It was a long story. I'm sure it was a long story.
I actually read about that, and
Right.
it was a long, convoluted story.
And of course, what they did was they tore down, it's a part of the 4th arrondissement. It's right next to the Marais. But it was
still
apparently
in the
very
Marais.
old buildings.
Yeah.
And they built this building, which is designed to be for the people. I think that's really why I like it, because it's not just a contemporary art space. It's a huge structure.
Right.
It has a huge national library. It's a library that anybody can go into and use, that has everything connected to art, design, architecture, film, the history of culture, period. It has space about architecture. It has space about everything connected to the arts that you can possibly imagine, including a film center. And I find it, I like it because it's big, it's airy, it has a view from up on top to die for.
Yeah, the view is very nice.
The rooftops of
good
Paris.
for photographers.
It's great. It's absolutely great.
Yeah.
And the only drawback to it, of course, is that it's a little bit expensive.
What is it, 16, 15?
It's something like that, yeah. If you want to do the temporary exhibits and the permanent collection, or I think it's 12 if you just do the permanent collection. By the way, it has 50,000 pieces of art, and it only can show 1,300 at a time. Mm-hmm. So it's a very interesting museum because every 3 months they change.
They rotate.
the permanent collection, and it's set up in chronological order. So if you want to have an idea of art that was made from the beginning of the 20th century up till now, it's one of the most wonderful places to just go for that and nothing else, just for that.
Yeah. Well, French people are very price sensitive, and so they do find it a bit expensive.
Right.
But it is open for free on the first Sunday of each month.
And one night a week.
Oh, and one night a week
And
too.
one night a week too, yes.
So I was there last Sunday, which was the first Sunday of December.
Right.
And there was a long line to get in for free. I thought I would try that, but
Well,
I only had an hour. So I was like, never mind.
If you've never been there, for those out there who have never yet gone, I mean, there's a huge esplanade in front of it, which is very, very big and very open. It's very medieval, actually. And surprisingly, the lines go very quickly. So because the space inside is enormous, and there's so much to do and so much to see. And also, it's a great museum because it has incredible blockbuster retrospective exhibits. I saw a year ago a retrospective of David Hockney's work, who is an artist who's alive still, who I absolutely adore. And it was fabulous. There was Giacometti a little bit before that. I mean, major artists with huge retrospectives. So it's a fabulous place. If you only have time to see one museum of modern contemporary art, it's probably the one to go to because it is so important in terms of its collection, you know.
And what I enjoy about it, and now that you say that it's a rotating permanent exhibit, that might not hold true, but I've been there twice that I recall clearly. I remember going there as a kid. I don't know who went in, but it's not so contemporary that people like me just go, who are they trying to kid? Like,
Well, that's
some contemporary art does that to me.
Right.
I'm like, no, there is no art here. This is just foutage de gueule. This is like, how would you say that in English?
You're kidding me, basically, in a polite way. Did you say you just gotta be kidding me?
There's no there. There's just a line. It's just a black line.
Well, there is, of course, at the end, but there's not a lot of it, which means that somebody like you who really can't deal with the very most recent
if you
stuff.
show me Picasso and Georgia O'Keeffe and people like that, I love that stuff.
But you have to understand that is no longer contemporary art. Picasso is over 100 years old. We are not talking contemporary art when we talk Picasso. We're talking modern art. It's a difference.
Okay.
Modern art is really 20th century up to a certain point. But it's fine. One of the things I think that's really good from a pedagogical point of view, even though it doesn't hit you over the head at the Puppeteer Center, is that because the permanent space is arranged in chronological order, you get an idea of the various movements up through the 20th century and into now the first part of the 21st century. And you can really pick and choose and see what you like. And I've done this a lot with university-age students. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily students who are art students. And it is fascinating to discover which of the works are the works that they remember and like. Because just like with little children, if you walk in there with no a prioris in your head, you'd be surprised by the things you respond to.
It's true.
Yeah.
My daughter actually likes contemporary art.
Yeah. And she's a very nice, normal person. So there you are. Anyway, so the Puppeteer Center is, of course, it's the biggie. And it really is. It rivals MoMA in New York as being a very, very important space for everything connected, because it is involved with design, with architecture, with photography, with every part of what would be contemporary culture and art. And it's so it's a major institution. Mm-hmm. It really is. However, Paris has other places, and I'm now really only going to focus on things that have to do with modern and contemporary or only contemporary work, because we know about all the other wonderful places that we've talked about before. There's a place that is in the 14th arrondissement, not very far from Denfert-Rochereau, where you have your catacombs.
Yes.
You go down.
They're not mine.
Not your catacombs.
The big lion, though. I claim the big lion.
You claim the big lion.
I
okay.
like the big
you
lion.
You like the lion at Denfert-Rochereau.
Yeah.
It's on the Boulevard Raspail, which means it's on the way to the Montparnasse. And it's the Fondation Cartier.
Ah, yes.
Now, even though it was created by Mr. Cartier, it's a building that actually was designed by a very famous architect, a French artist named Jean Nouvel, a very good architect. It's been only in existence since 1994. Most of these are very recent buildings, actually. It was designed specifically to hold contemporary art. It's mostly, not only, but mostly American art that is shown inside it, even though it is not specifically an American place. And it is very, very, very contemporary. Not contemporary the way some of the stuff is in the Palais de Tokyo, but it has a lot of photography. It has a lot of international artists. So you get Chinese contemporary artists. You get artists from all the continents in the world. It has Cinematheque as well. It has readings. It's a very, very interesting place.
Okay, so it's also a cultural center.
It's also a cultural center. Yeah. And one of the things about many of these places is that maybe that's because that is the new tendency. Mm-hmm. I hadn't really thought about it, but I think that is that a lot of these places, not all of them, but a lot of them are indeed cultural centers as well as just a museum. Mm-hmm. And the difference is that the Fondation Cartier has no permanent exhibit.
Okay.
So it's all traveling temporary exhibits.
Okay.
And it can be a major exhibit of a painter or a photographer, or it just doesn't matter.
So it depends when you come.
It depends on when you come.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice because it's a little out of the way. It's in a nice part of the 14th arrondissement. It's kind of nice, these beautiful big boulevards. And it's cool. It's a very interesting building. It's a lot of glass and stuff like that.
And that's Cartier, the fashion house.
The Cartier, the jeweler, dear.
The jeweler, yeah, okay.
Yes. Yeah. He sold some of his diamonds and he paid to have this building made. And apparently cost him a certain amount of money. But it's really kind of neat. And if you're looking for places that have modern or contemporary work and you don't want to go where there are huge crowds, where you'll see real Parisians, this is a place.
Oh, definitely.
This is the kind of place you will see some tourists, but this is where Parisians go and people from France. So, and that's a very nice one. Now, let's go to your wonderful Palais de Tokyo and the building that is literally right next to it, which is the Museum of Modern Art of the City of Paris. That is a mouthful. It is really a mouthful. And they haven't come up with an acronym for it. I don't know why, because you'd think that since MoMA is the Museum of Modern Art, but this one, the Museum of Modern Art of the City of Paris.
Let me see in French.
See if you can come up with a nice little moniker for it that doesn't mean you have to say that whole thing to just, go to it. Anyway, both of them are in this magnificent building that was built in 1937 for the World's Fair, and it's all part of the same kind of architecture as you have at Trocadero. They are at Chaillot.
Right.
And this is this very, 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 very monumental stone and plaster architecture with columns and sculptures and things on the outside. And of course, one of the wonderful things about both of these spaces is that they have a view over the Seine and of the Eiffel Tower to die for. What the difference is that...
Do they have like a rooftop terrace or something?
No, but they both have cafes.
Ah, okay.
And the cafe is, there's a part of the cafe that's inside for inclement weather, and then there's a beautiful terrace cafe.
Okay.
And in fact, the cafe is right in between the two. It's like there are two wings of this humongous structure. One side is the Palais de Tokyo, which means, for those of you who don't understand that, the Tokyo Palace. And don't ask me why it's called that, because I think it's because in the World's Fair, it was for Japan.
Oh.
I think that's why.
That makes sense.
I should have looked at it, but I think that's why. And the other side is the Museum of Modern Art of the City of Paris. And I don't think I want to say that anymore.
So MAMVP.
How would you pronounce that? I don't know.
No, it doesn't work. And if you put the de là, so it's the MAMDLVDP.
That's even worse.
That's why we call it.
It sounds like you took too many drugs, so I think we should...
Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville
of the City of Paris. Okay, so on one side, I'm going to start with the Museum of... This is the last time I'm going to say it. The Museum of Modern Art of the City of Paris, which is one of my favorite places to go in Paris, partly because of where it is, because I always manage to make sure I have time to have something to drink and look out over the water and see the Eiffel Tower. And because it has a fabulous collection of early 20th century art, which is a kind of overflow of what is at the Centre Pompidou, but concentrating on some very specific artists. So it has temporary exhibits also. I saw a temporary exhibit a couple of years ago that had to do with pop art. Okay. And another exhibit of, I can't remember who, but it was something much more contemporary. But what is very nice is that it's very big, it's very spacious, and it has a lot of art that you've probably heard of. A lot of the French artists, so the first half of the 20th century, you'll have Matisse, Derain, painters, a lot of really wonderful painters, and then some French artists that are more recent that most people who are Americans have not heard of. And it's interesting to see what French painters have been doing in the last half of the 20th century, because most Americans will not have heard of most of these artists. So it's a very complimentary museum to going to the Pompidou and then even to go to the Louvre.
So maybe is it later than Pompidou?
No, it's contemporary because Pompidou starts at the beginning of the 20th century.
Okay.
But the museum of this museum, I don't have to say it anymore. For some reason, it seems to have concentrated certain of these artists. So you have Dubuffet, who is a French artist, Dufy, who is a French artist. These are all 20th century artists, not end of 20th century art. But there's a whole lot of their work. And I think what happened was they really weren't sure where to put all of it.
Okay.
Because this particular museum was opened in 1961.
Okay.
So it started even before Pompidou.
Right.
And I think what happened was that between the work that was stored in the basements or wherever they store it in the Louvre, which used to have all of this work hidden away because they didn't have space to show it.
Yeah.
Before they opened Orsay, before they opened Pompidou, they took a little bit of it out and put it in this museum.
Okay.
And it's a very pleasant museum, and it's a medium-sized museum. So it's a very nice place to go, especially if the weather is nice and you can eventually, go outside and have a look. And then you can walk across the cafe and go up a couple of steps, and you come to the other side of this building, and that is what is now called the Palais De Tokyo. And the Palais De Tokyo was reopened in 2012. So it's very, very, very recent as a space specifically and only for the most eccentric contemporary art.
Yeah.
Which means, don't look at me like that, which means that it has two things that are interesting. One is because it was one of these structures that was built in the 1930s, it's really enormous, and they gutted the inside. They didn't do that on the other side of the other wing. They gutted it specifically because a lot of contemporary art pieces are installations that are very, very big. And so they wanted to have it's a mono space that can be rearranged according to whatever it is they want to put in it. But also it was designed with money, I believe, from the city of Paris. I'm not sure if it's also from, I'm sure also from the Ministry of Culture, to give a space for young, unknown artists, because that is the hardest thing in the world, is if you are an artist that is not famous already, is to get a space to have your work shown, and shown for even a short time, a week or two at a time. So this is a space that's dedicated to now. And it's a space that's dedicated to young. Young can mean anything you want it to mean, except that it's basically unheard of, unknown artists, some of whom are just out of art school, some of whom have been around for a while but haven't had a chance to really show their work. So a lot of it is, it's not painting, it's performance, it's installation, it's strange. A lot of it is very, very, very strange. I have no idea what was going on when you were there, but it's humongous. I didn't go in. It's 22,000 square meters inside. It's enormous space. And for those people who are really interested in seeing what is happening, more or less French artists. I mean, there may be some artists that are from other countries. For instance, my art students, when I was teaching at the art school here, if they went up to Paris, they would go there because it's work done by their contemporaries. And it's also a way of checking out to see if they think anything is worth anything or not. It's valid for that reason, if for no other. I've been to it a few times. I cannot say honestly that I've seen anything that I really remember, but that's it's a space that doesn't cost. It's purposely not expensive. It's purposely open to the public.
So it doesn't. You mean it's cheap or
it's cheap?
It's free?
I think. I can't remember if it's either cheap or free. I can't remember.
Okay.
But it's also and it has night performances of rock music and things like that. So it's really to gather a young crowd.
They're trying to attract some people.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of museums are really not for super young people. So,
true.
This is a way of trying to say, okay, we've got a space for you guys. You want to come? You can hang out and make a lot of weird things and noise, and it's okay. Yeah, why not? I'm very tolerant. I think it's perfectly fine. Yeah. I don't have to like it. I don't have to go.
Right.
That's my attitude.
Right.
Another space that's only been open for a very, very short time, only since 2014, and that is becoming very, very important as a space for major exhibits, and that is the Fondation Vuitton, which was sponsored by Mr. Bernard Arnault, who is one of the two richest men in France.
How do you spell the last name?
Arnault.
Okay.
Then there's the other one. One of them is the one that owns Vuitton, and the other one, I can never remember. The two of them,
are they brothers?
Pinot and Arnault. No, there's Pinot and Arnault. No,
okay.
they are rivals.
They're
rivals. Pinot opened the Museum of Contemporary Art in Venice because he was trying to build a museum on one of the islands in the Seine River and had problems with the administration in Paris and said, okay, screw you all, I'm going to take my work somewhere else, because both of them established museums around their own private major collection. And so he went off to Venice. So his museum is now in Venice, and Arnaud, his is this, he had Frank Gehry come design the building for him. Gehry of Guggenheim fame.
Yeah, he makes nice buildings.
Very incredible, absolutely incredible building. It's in the middle of the park of the Bois de Boulogne, which means it's on the western edge going outside of Paris in the 16th arrondissement. So you either need to take metro and bus or car to get there. It's got a part of it that has permanent exhibit of his collection of contemporary art. So we're not looking at Picasso or anything. We're looking at work from post-World War II on, and specifically the last 50 years. And major exhibits. The one that's there right now, and I believe it's up till February, but I'm not absolutely certain, is an exhibit of the work of Egon Schiele, who was an artist from the beginning of the 20th century, but whose work at the time was considered to be too avant-garde and scandalous. Actually scandalous. He actually went to prison because his work was considered to be obscene. Now it's pieces that are in major museums all over the world. And Jean-Pierre Basquiat, I think it's Jean-Pierre, I can't remember, who was a young New York artist who died in 1989 at the age of 27, and whose work is considered to be major work for the end of the 20th century in the United States, and whose painting I absolutely love. I happen to absolutely love his work. They are put together. A lot of times these days, contemporary shows juxtaposed two artists that are from time periods that are very different. In this case, I'm not sure if it works or not. I haven't seen the exhibit.
Right.
I've been told that it's a very long line to get in, but it's a place to go if you want to see a building that is absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, I bet most of the people go to see the building.
Well, they go to see the building, and then there's the permanent exhibit, which is a lot of his collection of artists that have been producing art for a lot of British artists, a lot of American artists, different things like that. But it's kind of a neat place to go. You just know to have to be prepared that you have to kind of traipse out to the western edge, the Bois de Boulogne.
Yeah.
But it's kind of nice. Obviously there's the museum, the Picasso Museum, but I put it in the category of modern art, not contemporary art anymore.
Right. That's right in the middle of the Marais.
And it's right in the middle of the Marais.
To get to.
And
it's included in the museum pass.
And it's included in the museum pass, and the Picasso Museum is only Picasso. I mean, it's not something else.
Interesting. I mean, it really shows off how crazy Picasso was.
He was crazy, but he was pretty talented too.
Oh, sure.
I mean, but it is a museum that's devoted strictly to him. So it's not a museum where you have permanent collection plus temporary things of somebody else.
Yeah.
There's another one that is the Jeu de Paume, which is actually a photography museum.
Right.
And it's on the end of the Tuileries, right next to the Orangerie. Now, the Orangerie is dedicated to Monet and to Impressionist or Post-Impressionist painters. And it's a small museum. And if you just walk across a little bit of the park, the Tuileries, there's another building right there.
Looks very much the same.
Looks very much the same. They were built at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's the Jeu de Paume, which basically means it was originally designed as indoor tennis courts.
Yeah.
And it is really interesting for photography. If you're interested in modern photography, artistic photography, it is the place to go. There are several places in Paris.
Was I with you when we walked past the photography exhibit in Toulouse, and I was pointing out to you that none of these were even in focus?
I don't remember.
Probably wasn't you
Probably
then.
Wasn't me.
And the guy at the door just says, "Ma'am, it's because he was using a pinhole camera." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Then I understand. Then I see the art." Because he was managing to take very large prints of scenes, but nothing was in focus.
Nothing was in focus.
Why would you exhibit a thing like that?
Because I think it was the beginning, that was a long time ago, of course, of photography as an art form, which really originated here in France. In the United States, photography really originated as a form of documentation. But in France, from the very beginning, there was a different spirit about what photography would become. And it really is true that photography as a form of art to compete with painting, I would say, really developed here in France first. And so the Jeu de Paume is very interesting for people who are interested in seeing international artists, all of whom do only photography.
Okay.
And then two others that I had not heard of before, one of which is in the 19th arrondissement, which is very interesting, and it's called the 104, which means the 104. I don't know why, because its address is not that. Its address is 5 Rue Buriel. So it's not the reason why it's called.
Buriel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Curiel. No, but Curiel.
Curiel.
In the 19th. And it's a cultural center, as we were just talking before we were on mic. That sounds really like a lot of fun. It's been open since the end of 2008. Never heard of it before. It has temporary art space. It's a temporary art space, but it also has music concerts. It has theater. It has poetry readings. It has a bookshop. It has a restaurant. And it sounds like a lot of fun.
Right. It sounds like the kind of place you go spend an afternoon.
You can go spend an afternoon or an evening, and you can see what the contemporary art is. And it's not very far from Sacré-Cœur. It's a little bit to the east of Sacré-Cœur. It's up in that area. But I'm going to check it out the next time I go up to Paris, because it sounds really, really like a lot of fun. And one last one that's been open also only since the 2000s, since 2005, outside of Paris. So I'm segueing into the outside of Paris in the Val de Marne.
Oh, that's not so far.
So it's kind of going towards Disney World.
Yeah.
And it's called the Mac Val Museum of Contemporary Art in the Val de Marne. Okay. So they gave it a moniker, the Mac Val.
So Mac is MAC?
MAC, right? And then /Val, VAL.
Okay.
And it's a contemporary art museum. It's actually in the town of Vitry-sur-Seine.
Okay.
And it's only French artists, relatively young. The politics is to make the entry fee very minimal. It's like 3 or 4 euros, because they want it to be available for people who are not the normal clientele for going to museums. And apparently it's doing very, very well. And it's a kind of place where it's brought in a lot of people from the burbs, the young people that normally would not go to see any kind of art in an art museum. And it was specifically set up in a part of the Val de Marne is east, I guess it's east of Paris, in an area that would cater to people who don't necessarily have the means to always get into the city center. So again, these are places that are really interesting, and the places to discover if this is a field that you're particularly interested in exploring. And if you've already been to Paris several times and you want to find new things to do, these are some of the things that I can suggest. Now, I've got a list, a not very big list, but of some places that are also really interesting for modern or contemporary art all over France.
Okay.
In no specific order, geographically. I should have done this in a way of like a clock going around the country. But it doesn't matter. Okay. Bordeaux. If you go to Bordeaux, among the other things to do, besides going to look at the beautiful limestone buildings and drink a lot of wine, it has a very, very, very interesting museum of contemporary art called the CAPC.
Okay.
And it's been open since 1983. And I've been there twice. And it's in buildings that were part of the hangars that were used for stocking the goods that came in on the ships.
Okay.
So it's in a very posh, very beautiful part of Bordeaux, actually. It's right not far from the big square, the Quincences Square. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not even sure. It's a beautiful part of
how do you, what?
The Quincences Square, which is this huge square, Quinconces.
Ah, yes.
I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
I'm gonna QUIN.
QUIN.
Yeah.
CONCES.
Quinconce?
Quinconce, maybe. I guess.
That's what I would guess.
Okay. It's one of the largest squares in a city in France, you know.
Is that
the bone with the big statue and the sculpture in the middle?
Is that where the water thing is?
There's a fountain.
There's a fountain.
A huge fountain, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's on the other. It's not very far from there. On the other side, in a very nice, really nice part of Bordeaux, and it's got. I don't know if it has a permanent exhibit, but it has interesting temporary exhibits at this museum, and it's very contemporary, but it's very interesting, and the building is also very beautiful to see.
Okay.
So it's a kind of nice thing to do, and it's in a nice part of Bordeaux. It's one of the things I remember that I really liked a lot about it. Rodez. Now I'm going to stay for the minute in the Southwest. We're going to stay in the Southwest for a minute. Rodez, which is, of course, a small city, 2 hours from Toulouse?
Yeah.
Northeast of Toulouse. Rodez has a very beautiful, brand new contemporary museum that was opened in 2014. That is called the Musée Soulage.
Okay.
And the reason it's called the Musée Soulage is because the museum is dedicated to the work of the man who is considered to be the greatest living French painter today. And you should know that on the 24th of December, he will be 99 years old. And that is Pierre Soulage.
Okay.
Who is still actually producing work. And the building is one of these buildings that's made of this very interesting 10-core steel. That's, this sort of fake rusted steel. Very, very contemporary. Very interesting because it's in the middle of... Rodez is a kind of small town.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a whole lot going for it in general. I mean, it's a little town that has its ups and downs in history. But it has a very old little city center. Very tiny. Just a few square blocks. And then there's this very beautiful... very contemporary building, and it's a fabulous museum for abstract painting. And it also has a part of the museum that has temporary exhibits. Now, I've been there quite a few times because I've gone there with students and I've been there by myself. And if you are interested in contemporary painting, and particularly the work of this artist, it's a really interesting place to visit. It's a very nice place to visit. It has a little fancy restaurant attached to it, too. But if you don't want to do the fancy restaurant, you can go across the park. And on the other side is this fabulous diner that has American hamburgers. And that's just as good, actually.
Good.
Yeah,
So
really.
something to do in Rodez. That's good.
Go do Rodez for that. Staying in the Southwest, we have the abattoir here.
In Toulouse, yes.
Which I have to say, I have to be very honest and say, is not my favorite museum. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting building. It was built in the 1820s as a slaughterhouse building, which everyone's going to go, ew, a slaughterhouse. It's actually a gorgeous brick building, really beautiful, with very interesting grounds around it and a beautiful park. But the collection is based on the private collection of one man, and it's not my favorite work. It's just not. Mm-hmm. And so it's very interesting when they have good temporary exhibits, and it is contemporary, so largely post-World War II and up. But it's nice, and it is the only contemporary art museum we have in Toulouse.
And they have some nice ceramic pieces outside of it by Léger, I want to say.
There's one piece or two by Léger, Fernand Léger.
Yeah. And they're outside of the museum, and they're kind of colorful.
Yes.
They're very nice.
He was very good. He did very interesting things. He did both painting and drawing, and then his most interesting work, I think, was actually his sculpture.
Yeah.
And what's nice...
This is kind of mosaic.
It could be a mosaic.
I'm not sure technically how it's made.
I don't know if it was a mosaic or not.
But it looks like a large mosaic that pictures large people.
Yeah, right.
Doing
it's
like work. They're workers.
I don't know if it's a mosaic or not. But the thing about this museum is that it was highly anticipated after the Museum of Contemporary Art opened in Bordeaux, which of course is a kind of rival of Toulouse as a city. And this building itself is really beautiful, and they really did a good job of trying to make it into a space for contemporary art. But its permanent collection is a bit disappointing. It's not very interesting as far as I'm concerned personally. It has one huge piece by Picasso that is a curtain that he did for a theater piece. That's very famous. and it has a minotaur on it. Then it's just painted. But other than that, what's interesting in this particular museum is when they have interesting temporary shows come through.
Right.
And they do, but
Go
not always.
figure.
You know,
Picasso put a minotaur.
Yeah, well, he
on
was
something
on a curtain.
Who would have thunk?
Staying in the southwest, with Bordeaux, Rodez, Toulouse, and Nîmes. Nîmes.
Ah, la Maison Carrée.
Yep.
Next to it, right?
Yep. So you have the Roman temple,
Yeah,
which is called the Maison Carrée.
Yeah.
And right next to it is the one called the Carré d'Art.
Yes.
And
I've seen it. I wanted to go in, but we ran out. I mean, it was like half an hour before they closed, and we knew it wasn't going to be time.
Yeah, and it's modern, obviously. It's
it
glass,
looks nice.
but it's basically the same format, same size. It was inspired by, they're opposite each other. It was opened in 1993.
Uh-huh.
A very famous architect, Norman Foster, was the designer of it. And directly inspired by the Roman temple, right there.
Yeah.
And so it's really neat. And it has, again, it's a space that has no permanent exhibit. So whatever the temporary exhibit is, this is outside of major museums, like some of the ones like the Pompidou Center, that have enough money to buy and keep a collection, or the Vuitton, the Foundation Vuitton, because it was his private collection. A lot of the smaller, which means outside of Paris museums, wind up having just temporary exhibits that come through.
Yeah.
Because it means otherwise they have to have a lot of money to be able to buy pieces. And so, but it's really neat. And it's, again, the one in Bordeaux, the one in Rodez, and even the one in Toulouse, like the one in Nîmes, they're interesting from the architectural point of view as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the one in Nîmes is quite striking. I hope I'm going to have to look through my photos to see if I have a good photo of it.
See, you have a good photo of it, yeah.
Because it's pretty striking.
It is very striking. So leaving that area and kind of zigging and zagging a little bit, I discovered that there is a museum of modern and contemporary art that apparently sounds very, very interesting in Saint-Étienne. Saint-Étienne. Notice, everybody who's listening, listen to the way she just repeated Saint-Étienne after me, because for us here, most of us, unless you have had to, have never been to Saint-Étienne. You know?
Oh, I've been to Saint-Étienne many times.
It's across from Lyon, on the other side of the valley. It's a city that has
family there. Of course,
Do you have family there?
I have family there.
Oh,
yes, I have a cousin
okay.
there. I have family everywhere.
Obviously industrial, a little bit, but it's up and coming, and it has it's up and coming.
No.
It's a fixer-upper. It's a city that's a fixer-upper. It's actually
a lot
in a
of
very,
it looks like it's a fixer.
It's in a very interesting area, and it has apparently a very, very, very big collection of contemporary art and design. And Saint-Étienne happens to have, strangely enough, a very good art school as well. So that is probably why they received the money from the Ministry of Culture to open up this museum. So it's kind of neat to know that you can go to these places that are really off the beaten track.
Definitely, yeah.
And still find something like that, because it's, it's in the middle of the messy
Saint-Étienne also has an interesting museum of a mine. So it's an old actual mine that you can visit, and you go down into the mine and all that.
Right.
It was very interesting.
Well,
I went in there years ago with family. You know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, places like that are really great when you've already had your first 2 trips to France and you've done the major things that you've said they're on your first list of, like, oh, these you have to go see. This is the places that are wonderful to discover because they're a little bit different. But I don't
think Saint-Étienne has a pretty city center.
No, except that it has a cathedral that's a little bit interesting.
Oh, okay.
Because it was made out of lava.
Oh.
So it's dark.
Yeah.
And it makes it very interesting. Well, the one in Rodez is made out of purple and red sandstone. It's actually kind of interesting, too.
I only ever go to Rodez for basketball games. I don't know.
Oh, it's actually kind of interesting.
They have a lot of good girl basketball.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
I really am. Okay, I'm going to move further east. And I'm going to take everybody to, of all places, Nice.
Yeah.
Nice, and up above it, 25 kilometers away, another into Saint-Paul-de-Vence, which is a place that I've been to many times and absolutely adore.
Yeah.
In Nice, there is a beautiful, absolutely beautiful contemporary art museum that was opened in 1990 that has contemporary art, modern art, which means all through basically the 20th century. And it has a lot of the best French artists that really were producing work from the middle of the 20th century on. One of my favorite women artists is Niki de Saint-Phal. A lot of her work is there because she actually lived in and around the Nice area. Nice, which is a city I happen to like a lot, has, of course, a very beautiful Matisse museum because he lived there a good part of the last of his life. But this is a neat building, too, and it's a very, very interesting museum, and it has a very good collection if you want to see what some French artists were doing starting after World War II.
Did you say what the name of it is?
It's simply called the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art of Nice.
Okay.
That's it. And then, if you're going to be in that area, so you're going to travel along the Riviera and go into the Provence area, there are other little museums along the way. This is not a list of everything that exists. This is just a list that I'm suggesting. You take your car and you travel up into the hills, 25 kilometers, and you come to a place that has a special place in my heart, and that's called the MAG Foundation. MAG, but it's spelled M-A-E-G-H-T. It's a Dutch word. M-A-E-G-H-T.
Well, that is a weird thing.
Which for a long time I used to call the Might Foundation. And it wasn't that, and it wasn't the Mecht Foundation, and it's actually the MAG Foundation.
MAG Foundation, okay.
And it is a private museum, unlike most of these others that are actually built by the cities, okay? It was built by a man named Amy Mag, and it was built... the story is actually very touching. It was built in the 1960s.
Okay.
He was an art... he was in the business of buying and selling art. He was a gallerist who had a lot of money. He had accumulated a personal art collection that was very important. And unfortunately, in the early 1960s, he had a 9 or 10-year-old son who died of leukemia. And he was very, very good friends with several of the most important French artists at the time, one of whom is Dubuffet, who was an artist that was very, very interesting man. He was friends with Matisse. He was friends with a whole lot of people. Matisse was a very old man by this time. And what happened was that somebody made a suggestion to him that he do something other than simply staying as an art merchant. And that if he could, now where he got all the money from, I really don't know. I don't know the details of all of this, how did it work. But that if he wanted to create a space for all of these artists, they would all contribute major works and make it into a permanent space for 20th century art in France. And it is beautiful. It's just on the edge of the village of Saint-Paul-de-Vence, which is absolutely gorgeous anyway.
Yes.
And it is a modernistic building, which of course no longer is the most contemporary looking thing because it was built in the 1960s, but it's designed to fit into the landscape of Provence with its olive trees and its wonderful plants and flowers and everything. And all of the major French artists of the 20th century, all of them contributed works or made a work specifically for this place, including Chagall. And so it's a beautiful place to visit.
Sounds good.
And it's his grandchildren who are now the owners of it and who run it. And it's run as basically a museum, but it is actually in private hands. But it's a very beautiful place to go. And if you're
I'm sure a lot of
there,
listeners go to Saint-Paul-de-Vence.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, so they could stop there.
And it was really meant to be a place to show art, not that's to be sold, but just to be seen.
Like you have to have a car. Is it outside of Saint-Paul? You have to car.
My memory is, I haven't been back in quite a while, is that there might, it's certainly possible now that there might be a bus that goes from Nice, but it's easier if you have a car.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just because you go up into the hills behind Nice. And that's just very briefly a couple of others because they're interesting. And
Marseille has a modern art museum.
Marseille has a museum that is the museum.
Yeah.
But it's not a museum of contemporary art.
Okay.
It's a museum of Mediterranean culture.
Okay, so we skipped that one.
And so, because I was thinking, well, there is also what they call La Charité, which is what used to be a hospital in Marseille, and has temporary exhibits of contemporary art as well. But interestingly enough, I didn't really include it on this list.
You decided to.
I just want to mention two others, and they're further north. Now we're going to go to the other end of France. One of them is on the outskirts of Lille.
Okay.
And it's called the Lamb, Lam.
Okay.
The Lille,
Lille Art Moderne.
Art Moderne. I think that's what it is. Lille Art Moderne. I think that's what it is, right? And it's a very, very, very big and very important museum that's basically funded by Lille and the region around Lille, which of course is the Department of the North. So it's the very furthest part up there. And it's a museum of modern art, contemporary art, and art brut. And art brut is very interesting because art brut is a term that was created by the artist Dubuffet, and it designates art done by people who did not train as artists.
I see.
And it's a whole field of art where you have people who are. It's not folk art so much as it's art. Sometimes people who are disturbed. Some of it is actually interesting, but a little bit disturbing to look at. But people who have a kind of genius for art, but who never had any formal training and use it. And it's got a very big collection of this work, and it's.
How would you say that in English? Art brut? So is it like brutal art?
It's not primitive art. See, primitive art is no longer politically correct term for traditional arts of other cultures.
Yeah.
As far as I know, the term is used in English. Art brut.
Art brut.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Anyway, it's a very big, beautiful, modern museum.
Huh.
And I saw pictures of it on internet as I was looking it up. And I've been to Lille, which I loved as a city to visit, actually. And this looks like a really interesting place to go. It's just outside in a very big contemporary building. And the way they've designed it is that it's got different wings, so you can kind of beautiful grounds around it. So it looks kind of interesting. And then the last one, last but not least, in Strasbourg, there's a museum of modern contemporary art that is in a very big new building that's 20 years old. It's actually a building that half of it has older art, the kind you'd see at the Louvre and things like that. And half of it is designed specifically for contemporary and modern work. And it has temporary and permanent exhibits. And it looks very interesting because it's very colorful, very beautiful building, again, with very colorful hallways and things to see. And so to Strasbourg, which is a city I highly recommend visiting.
Oh, yeah. Strasbourg is beautiful.
Yeah. It has an ancient medieval art museum. It has the cathedral. It has old Little France, which is a neighborhood in the center of it.
Very pretty.
It has the canals. It has everything. And it has this very, very interesting contemporary art museum. And because Strasbourg is an international European city and has a very cosmopolitan population, it's a museum that has turned out to be very popular there as well.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, Strasbourg has the European Parliament.
Right.
So
I mean, obviously...
But you can't visit that.
There are probably others.
Unless it's Jour du Patrimoine or something like that.
Exactly.
They open it on occasion, but
But I think it gives people an idea that there are other things to see. If you're interested in that kind of artwork, there really are places to go all over the country. Yeah. And I'm sure that there are others, and somebody will write and say, why didn't you mention this? And I'm sorry. I really apologize.
Yeah. I mean, like everything else we've done, we can't be exhaustive.
No.
We just try to mention the ones that catch our attention.
But basically, I've been to all but 3 of them.
Huh.
Yeah. So
poor thing.
Oh gosh, no. It's so much fun.
No, I'm gaining an appreciation for modern art. Contemporary, I'm not so sure.
It depends on what it is. I don't like everything.
The Tate I found a little hard to take.
Oh, well.
Yeah, no.
Well,
it was a
maybe in another
me.
40 years you'll like it.
Give me time.
Give you time. Anyway, for those of you who are interested in knowing about where all these things are,
there you are.
There you are. This is another kind of art experience.
Thank you so much, Elyse.
You are quite welcome, Annie.
Okay, au revoir.
Bye.
Thank you, Phil Robertson and Jay Jensen, for becoming new Patreon supporters this week. I released several Patreon rewards for the month of January 2019, just in the last few days. There's a new lunch break French about Napoleon's mother, Laetitia. She was truly an extraordinary woman. This is a bilingual audio file with a written out version as well. And so it's in French and in English. It's meant for you to practice your French listening skills. I also released a new French history brief about a street in Le Marais that if you've been to Le Marais, you've probably walked on that street and you didn't realize all the amazing things that happened there, and I talk about that. And I also added 4 photos of things in Paris that I think you should check out next time you visit, because they are cool and they are not on everybody's radar. And you know me, I want to put the good stuff of Paris that not everybody knows about on your radar. $2 Patreon supporters get the photos, but if you support at a $5 level, then you get the lunch break French, the French history brief, and the photos. To be one of the wonderful people who support the show on Patreon, go to patreon.com/join us, Patreon, join us without spaces or dashes. And thank you so much for giving back. I loved seeing all your photos tagged with the hashtag Join Us in France on Instagram. I found several this week and I responded to them directly. That's very fun. Please keep doing it. So hashtag Join Us in France. And if you are on Twitter, it's at Paris Podcast. And I will check those every day. And the big thing for France today, other than the fact that finally we got a sunny day in Toulouse, which I'm sure you're fascinated by that. It rained for like 10 days. It was awful. But today we got a nice sunny day. Well, but by the time tomorrow, so I'm releasing the episode 2 days from now, but tomorrow is La Chandeleur. La Chandeleur is Crepe Day. And so I posted on the Facebook group my recipe for homemade crepes. It's very easy to do, and I want to tell you about it right here because, frankly, you can do it from memory. It's that simple. You don't need any special equipment to make crepes, but you do need a really good non-stick pan. And if you have one of those specialized crepe pans, it's better because the edge is shallow and it makes it easier to turn the crepe. All right, so the trick to not have lumps is to mix all liquid ingredients first and then add the flour. You can do this either in a stand mixer, but I do it with a bowl and a whisk and it works just fine. I mean, if I was making 100 crepes, I would probably use a mixer, but I usually make this batch that makes 20, so it's not that big. Okay, so you start with a cup of milk and a cup of water. Now, you could do 2 cups of milk instead of water. I like to do some of both, but you cannot do 2 cups of water. It'll be disgusting. Then you need something for flavor, and I like to use a tablespoon of vanilla, the good Mexican vanilla that I buy at Costco, because French vanilla in France is not that good. So I buy it at Costco, and then I use either dark rum or orange blossom. Depending on, the flavor I want to get to. And so it's 1 big tea of vanilla and between 1 and 3 of the other 2. It depends on how strong you like the flavor to be. 3 tablespoons of sugar and 3 eggs. You mix all of that well, and then you slowly, like a tablespoon at a time, you add the flour. And you mix with a whisk as you add the flour. The dough at the end, and it's 2 cups of flour. The dough at the end should be kind of runny still. I mean, you'll be like, it's not like pancakes where it's fairly firm. It's not going to be much thicker than what you began with. But what's going to happen is then you're going to let it sit outside of the refrigerator. You don't want to put it in the fridge. For an hour, for a full hour. And I just set my alarm so I don't forget. And you let it sit there, and while it sits, the flour is going to get thicker. It's going to get so much thicker that at the end, before you start making the crepes, you might need to add a couple tablespoons more liquid, depending. You have to kind of get a feel for this. Now, to cook your crepes, you need a pan. Like I said at the beginning, it has to be really good non-stick, and you need a tiny bit of oil. So little oil that the easiest way to do this is to grab a paper towel, and you put a little bit of oil in a dish, and you make your paper towel wet with oil, and then you rub that onto the pan. So there's no visible, you can see that the pan is a tiny bit shiny, but there's no beads of oil or anything like that. And then when your pan is good and hot, so I use an induction stovetop, and it goes between 1 and 9, and I set it to 7. So, when I start, I set it to 8 because I'm always impatient. And then I keep it to 7. And what you do is you take like a quarter cup of the mix, and you tilt your pan, and then you make sure that you fill the whole surface of the pan with the mixture. I use a 9-inch pan. And it's 30 seconds on each side. Now, before you first turn it, it's going to stick on the edges a little bit. So you need a knife or something to get it unstuck. Once you've turned it over once, and I do that with my fingers because that way I know my fingers are delicate enough that I won't break it. Then you can, flip it in the air and do all that good stuff. But the first turn has to be done by hand, otherwise it won't work. All right, I think that's it. Did I forget anything? So it's 30 seconds on each side. And so to make 20 crepes, it'll take you 20 minutes. And that's the problem, is that it takes a long time to just stand there and do your crepes. And you can't leave the stove. Like today I burned 2, and then I thought, okay, I'm just going to set a timer. Otherwise, because you think, I have 30 seconds, I can go put some dishes away. And then you see something else and you get distracted. And so I set a timer and just stay in front of your stove. Anyway, now the real question is, what do you like to put on your crepes? In my family, we love Nutella, of course. Who doesn't? We also love peanut butter and bananas. That is so good. We love to just sprinkle some granulated sugar and some drops of lemon. That is absolutely fantastic. I also love, but I'm the only one, crème de marron. So that's chestnut puree. I don't know if you can find that in America, but it's easy to find in France. And that's about it. I don't like it so much with jam or whatever, but I would love to know, #join us in France, photos of your crepes and maybe your favorite recipe, your favorite way to make them, and what you like to put on them. That would be fun. And also, I would love photos of you with modern and contemporary art in France. That would be also very, very fun. Okay, I think that's it for today. Do check out the walking tours May 5th through 8th on addictedtofrance.com. Stay warm. I know it's super cold in America right now, unless you're in Australia, and in that case, stay cool. Because I know it's super hot in Australia. And I'll talk to you next week with a new episode on 12 tips for visiting Paris. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2019 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.